Hi, I'm Perttu Hämäläinen, and this is our poster, Neural Language Models as What-If Engines for HCI Research. Let's start with some motivation. First, verbal data such as interviews is common in HCI and UX research. Second, modern language models like GPT-3 are surprisingly good at continuing almost any given text within the limitations of the training data. On the right, you see GPT-3 generating code based on the preceding comments. Third, common training datasets are collected from millions of web pages and include many reviews and discussions about interactive technology and software. Taken together, these observations motivate our research question. Basically, we are interested whether GPT-3 could role-play an interview participant in HCI research. In other words, we are interested in whether models like GPT-3 could expand computational user modeling to the domain of interview data. Here's a simple example. The boldface text is written by us, and the participant response is generated by GPT-3. We do recognize that language models are not without problems and the generations can be biased. Therefore, any conclusions based on AI data should be validated with real humans. At the same time, I'm at least personally fascinated by the potential of these models in initial exploratory research. For instance, when thinking of what could be good interview topics and questions, it's very convenient to try out different things quickly using GPT-3. Of course, fictional interviews are not an entirely new idea. There are several anecdotal reports of GPT-3 generating both interview answers and questions. In this poster paper, we describe a pilot study of generating interviews in the HCI and games domain. First, we explored eliciting different participant voices by including demographic information in the prompt. Second, we generated 100 responses to 2 prompts and inspect how many of those are plausible and what kind of errors the model makes. Here's an example of how the prompt can control the participant voice. We describe the participant as a 4-year-old boy and ask him about his favorite game. Fittingly, the responses are short and describe children's games like Angry Birds. In contrast, this is how a participant described as a chief technology officer in his 40s describes the game Civilization. The result is not perfect, as there are too many sentences starting with "and", but the content appears plausible. To further investigate the answer quality, we used a prompt inspired by a recent study about experiencing video games as art. This allowed us to compare the results against real human data. The core idea is that we asked the fictional participants to describe a game they have experienced as art. The best case generations are very human-like. Here you can see both a real and a GPT-3 response about the game Journey. However, GPT-3 does also make errors. For instance, there's the unnecessary repetition noted earlier, and the model may also dodge the question. We also noticed the model inventing imaginary games or gameplay. Emotionally, this response makes sense, but it's factually incorrect, because there's no baby to take care in the game Journey. More examples and discussion can be found in the paper. In summary, the best case generations appear very human-like. We have also demonstrated that GPT-3 can indeed role-play different participants. This means that one can draw samples from different imaginary populations, but of course more work is needed to study the biases in representing different demographics. We also found that not all of the data is usable. The paper describes some simple automatic curation methods we employed. However, even after such curation, our estimate is that only 1 generation out of 2 or 3 is plausible and usable. For now, it seems that GPT-3 is best for small-scale interactive exploration, for instance using the browser-based Playground app. On the other hand, large-scale batch generations of hundreds of responses causes data curation problems. Regarding future work, we are currently conducting a more rigorous study about the human likeness of GPT-3 responses. Future work is also needed to properly understand the biases in how GPT-3 represents different demographics. That concludes my talk. Thanks for watching.